As long as the recording's good. Okay, it's being recorded. Got it.
So I'll just ask you how you're doing and then
Uh,
we'll get into it. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Cool. Hi, Dan. Hi, David. How are you?
Hi. Hi, Terry. It's good
Good.
to meet you.
Of course, you as well. Your work is kind of very infamous for being so specific and doing kind of a lot of zany, crazy things over the years. So I'm wondering, not everybody knows what StrataCut is, which you kind of invented the term for. Can you give me an overview of this form of animation?
Yeah. Um, I think of it as geometry animation, and it's space over time. Um, Much of what's claymation, claymation is a subset of stop motion, and StrataCut is a subset of claymation, but it uniquely allows you to see a two-dimensional surface illusion on a three-dimensional block, and it's a mystery block. You can't really see what's going on inside it. So when you cut it, much like a loaf of bread, all of these images and pre-programmed, I think of it as predetermined, pre-sculpted lines and geometry distortions are laid into a clay block, which then, when it's cut away, reveals just amazing psychomorphic a look unique to itself. Really, it's sort of, you can kind of tell that's how it was made. Um, yeah, is that a good
Yeah,
first?
yeah. I love the word psychomorphic. I'm wondering, can you explain how you create such a thing from
Yeah.
because I've never attempted one myself, but I've watched a lot of maybe I should at some point. But can you just explain how you create, moving images and animation from
Yeah,
a loaf of clay?
yeah. You, Hey, Terry, I just want to say the StrataCut living in your head and in your mind right now, whatever that may be, is as interesting or more so than whatever you would actually make with it. I think the concept of trying to do it and understanding how it's done is where all the sweet, juicy, wow, weird jelly is.
Yeah.
And doing it teaches you a whole other set of experiences because you understand that we're all cohesively glued together. Every moment in time is cohesively glued together with every other moment in time. And that's a striking sort of four-dimensional metaphor
Yeah.
for uh, a dimension that we can't see because humans never, we're time blind. We never had this need to have an understanding of continuity of our motion through space. And so the art of showing these loaves was described to me recently as sort of a sacrifice to, I don't know, the cosmic gods, in the sense that you have to destroy the StrataCut block in order to reveal its animation. To complete the art of the whole thing, you have to
Yeah.
actually, yeah, hack it and kill it. But then it explodes. It's sort of, I think of it as the difference between potential energy and kinetic, which means a static clay sitting in a block. Once you've laid it in the right way, it's sort of like a series of layers, shapes, textures. I have videos on this, of course, but think of it as like food is a very good analogy. Only in food, uh, you don't want the sushi roll to be continuous. You want the sushi roll in food as you're cutting it up to change into very specific warpy blobs or lines. And as you put that your mind to the idea of making that illusion in the two-dimensional cutting,
Yeah.
you've built a three-dimensional shape to do that, right?
Yeah.
You're thinking in time like a line flow. Think like a line flow. So if I want to be walking in that line flow, I'm imagining, this sort of thing going on as I build it. Um, Gosh, I mean,
Have you ever read Kurt Vonnegut? It's
right,
kind of reminding me, I forget what novel it is, but there's like aliens that are looking at humans, but they see us as like four-dimensional beings of the
right,
completion of our life. So they see this
yeah,
long person with like thousands and thousands of arms and legs as like one piece in time versus like we just see cutouts of those times. But it sounds you're kind of reminding me of the concept that he tried to explain in oh gosh, I wish I could remember which book it was. But
Right now, I agree. Yeah, that's an excellent example, by the way. And I'm glad you brought it up. And I can't remember the name, the specific.
I have it in my
He
bookshelf
has a
somewhere.
name
If I
for
could
his
just,
aliens.
I could just find it right now. But anyways, also while
Yeah,
you're talking, have you ever thought of leaving like I liked how you said, you have to destroy this thing to see what's on the inside, and then
yeah,
animate it, I guess. Have you ever thought of like leaving a time capsule that's 100 years from now it can be finally cut
absolutely.
to show the
I
animation?
I come around to that more and more. You know,
Yeah.
the there's a real catharsis to seeing it explode after you build one. And the demos, I've been doing demonstrations focused on different aspects of it this summer. It's all on Instagram. Please,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
know, it's a good reason to go there and look at Stratacut. But I always want to cut it up because as an audience, live audience or as a in-person audience, either way, is looking at it. They know they watched all of it happen, get built, and then they see the result. And so there's a culmination or a real sense of catharsis, which is just irresistible. But I'm going to get back to your point. I agree that you want to leave it as time capsules. You want to have it sit there for 1,000 years uncut. You want to, that is actually the conceptual art nugget of the whole thing. That um, a frozen conscious activity loaf has has stuck itself into a shape uh, that lives beyond any of us for however long it wants to live, as long as it doesn't melt or get whatever destroyed. And at any point, you can reveal it, and then the message in a bottle sort of comes out from whatever I had put into it or anybody puts into it to that those people, that entity, the singularity of humans who are watching on the other side
Yeah.
as they open up these
I wonder if
cut
somebody's listening. Some
strata cut
poor
books.
some poor listener is still not really understanding what a strata cut is, and we're saying frozen
No,
continuity loaf. Like, so I'm wondering, can
it's
we just
simple. Just log
yeah,
in,
just look it
spend
up.
five
If you
minutes,
don't know what
pause
we're
right
talking
here,
about,
go for
look it
five
up.
minutes, log in, look at it, come back.
You'll get it immediately. So, okay,
Yeah,
maybe we can just go through your process because
yeah,
uh, with typical animation, stop motion, 2D, 3D, etc.
yeah.
Even film, 12 frames per second, 24 frames per second. But with StrataCut, how are you predicting actions being made in the animation based on a time period? Like, are you measuring out like kind of 12 centimeters is 1 second of strata cut, and within those 12 centimeters you try to like make a clay action? Is that like I don't know, can
Yeah,
you
that's roughly correct.
okay, I'm just making this up on the spot, so I'm glad I'm roughly
No,
correct.
the nitty gritty of it though is you have to figure out the minimum distance you need to cut in order for it to peel off unified. Like you don't want to be cutting chop, slice like a fillet where you're just taking pieces at a time if you can avoid it,
Yeah.
because the irregularity of that cut will sort of look like a water shimmer or something. So having it be a single straight slice, you decide, hey, an eighth of an inch
Hmm.
is a general ballpark, which is like 3 millimeters, three or
Wow.
four. And you, as long as you can control the cut, then that's your unit of time. That's your unit of frame, your unit of measure, your exposure sheet, your decision as to what kind of shape programming you want exactly at that moment on the length sheet. The length sheet is flexible though, because if your strata cut's small, like about the size of a, I don't know, that,
An egg.
um, you can cut a twelfth of an inch. You can
Okay.
get down to 2 millimeters because you have enough control between the knife and your hands to get
Wow.
more animation out of an inch or
And
a
it's not
distance.
squishing the rest of the clay as you make every cut?
Well, it's not a recut. I would, if you build it at like 2 inches by 3 inches, you're going to be able to get a twelfth of an inch.
Hmm.
If you build it at like sort of postcard size or bigger, you're going to get a eighth of an inch. And if you build it really big, and there's times when I've gone to like a sheet of paper as a scale, which
Wow.
is huge amount of clay and very dense and heavy. I had to cut it with a guillotine, but that was a sixth of an inch, not, it was even fatter. And the reason why it gets fatter is that um, you uh, you want the in this case a guillotine blade, a mechanical guillotine blade. You want that not to bend on the way down. You want it to make a single. You have to make it big enough of a cut that the imperfections of how it flows through the clay are not seen, because each cut is actually a single item, right? It isn't filleting, it isn't scooping, it isn't just taking a sliver here and a sliver there. So a sixth of an inch, though, relates to your timing. How would you elasticate your shape geometry? Because if I build an animation at a sheet of paper size, I want that to move fairly slowly. And if I want to build an animation at you know, a business card size, you could make the animation move much faster,
Gotcha.
because the length of the cut is changing the perception of how fast that motion is happening once you've programmed the clay into the block.
Wow, I love all these technical details. Also, like, just rewatching some of your stuff before this chat. How do you predict how do you change the motion over time? Because like you're essentially covering up each frame with new clay. You can't like take that clay off and go, where were the eyes? Where was the
Right.
whatever? I remember you have like a counting animation. You have the numbers like actually like twirling like in
Right.
3 dimensions
Right.
with this with the cuts. Like how did you accomplish that,
Well,
knowing that you're cutting like a millimeter, 2 or 3 millimeters each time?
uh, you measure it out, and as you're cutting, you're marking it off like an exposure sheet. And if you're slightly ahead, like if you're cutting too much, you have to sort of go down to thinner slices. And if you're cutting too little, you have to go to thicker slices, and you do it gently. So you're just taking the literal eighth of an inch or 3 millimeter measurement on the side, and you're trying to match it. And if you get a little ahead of it, you just go a little lighter. And if you get a little in front, go a
Yeah.
little, yeah. But you had a lot of questions there wrapped up. Um, how do you pre-visualize it? You lay it down on a sheet with the measurements, and you have all of the explosive and hit points in the music or in the audio track that you want to hit. And then it's given, in that case, like I think it was an eighth of an inch. It's given an eighth of an inch, and I just try to keep it at that rate, give or take a few. That particular piece, 1 to 40 Sesame Street, all the numbers changing and rotating, um, was about 40 feet long.
Sorry, how many feet?
Um, 40,
40
four,
feet. Where
four
do you
zero, 35 meters. I don't know
where
how
do you
I
have
convert it.
space to make a 40
You
foot
don't.
long clay
You
loaf?
don't. You build it in train cars.
Yeah,
It's like
that
train
makes
cars on a
sense.
train track. And so you build one piece and another and another. And at the end of one train car, you create a dovetail joint, or a sort of feathering that is designed ideally to tongue and groove right to the next train car, right? So you're attaching them, but you build it that way, but you take them off a shelf. And so every 4 feet or every 6 feet, whatever chunk of length you have on a board, you pull that down, and that's added to the previous train car before you can see the joining process. You see a lot of what's extruded from the
Yeah,
log as it's being cut, but you don't see past maybe a foot, right? And so I would have to put another 4 feet on it behind off camera to make sure that you saw the whole 40 feet all at once, just coming right at you.
that makes a lot of sense. Have you
Some
just
other you had to invent, because I only had a small garage.
yeah.
And the camera also is, for stop motion people, is tilted up like this. The plane of the Stratacut is on this. And so if the camera is slightly below the horizon and is looking up, that means all you have to put is a card. You really don't need any kind of floor or any support. It's on a conveyor belt, but you can't see the conveyor belt, because the bottom of the edge of the camera is just tilted up enough.
Yeah.
And the key is just to have a nice background up there. And that's a super simple way to execute decent, a decent Stratacut
So
in a
they're
very
actually
small.
opposite. Like you have the clay coming at an up angle and the camera pointed at an opposite up angle. And then there's a conveyor belt that you're
Yeah,
turning
correct.
slowly.
It's the conveyor belt. Yes, you can use popsicle sticks. You can use chopsticks. You can use, I used, plexi, pieces of plexi, lines of anything. And you
Yeah.
just run two pieces of tape along that, all these little, the railroad tracks, if you will, the tracks that you're putting down.
Yeah.
Just imagine two pieces of masking tape. And then you lay that on any surface and put some guide rails down, which are simply, a ruler can be a guide rail. As long as there's a bump there, the whole thing will slide really evenly
Oh,
because it's just paper on paper. It's just sliding because it has no the popsicle sticks and tape are sort of unified, especially when you put a Stratacut block on it. That stuff isn't shifting around anymore. It makes it very heavy and therefore stable. And so when the conveyor belt goes forward, you're just chopping off the tape of each popsicle stick as it comes along.
oh
You're
wow.
taking it out. And that's happening literally right below the edge of camera.
And then you're adding popsicle sticks on the end at the back.
Yeah,
More
right.
tape. Oh wow. I've never, and that helps with measurement and everything too, I'm sure.
Yeah, you still have to decide where your cut is. The key is to always know, oh, in this in this space with nothing else in it, how do I decide where my pointer is? So I decide the knife cut. And I use a plumb bob because the plumb bob you can take out of frame, but then I let it drop in between frames, and that tells me where I want the knife cut each time. And
Wow.
so it's a consistent understanding of why each frame doesn't go backwards and forwards too much. If you do it by hand and you're not looking, you're going to get more wavering and more other kinds of
Yeah,
yeah.
wow. Oh my
I'm glad
goodness.
I can see in your face, Terry, that this makes sense to you. So
Oh yeah, it
I'm
does.
happy.
I'm actually thinking of projects where I could have used such a conveyor belt instead of trying to jimmy rig something else. But that makes so much sense
And
because you can just chop off. It's like
yeah,
tape is super cheap and it's a huge long 100 feet.
and
And
you want
you can just keep taking off popsicle
yeah,
sticks, chopsticks,
and
and add
keep
them into
going.
the end.
There's a more. I'm going to give you a level up design. So take
Okay.
that as a
Okay.
starting point. A simple way to make that better is to shoot down into a mirror. So put your camera up, looking down. The Stratacut is here, and you gain a double image, which I find very sexy. It's sort of like a mirror pond effect. If it's cut up on a mirror, right,
Yeah.
and the loaf is going this way, but the camera's looking down, not this way, but just down at it, right, and it the mirror effect doubles the Stratacut, kind of like what Instagram does when you put like little, I don't know, blurry things top and bottom. There's sort of a
Yeah. Yeah.
seductive hypnosis to that, right? It's not just an artifact, it's an intentional artifact to make you seduced. Your outside retinas are being seduced on the top and bottom, so you watch the focused middle. And having this mirror pond effect with the if you add the conveyor belt coming across, you can hide it underneath, or you can let it be seen. But the key is then to put a card up here. So imagine the camera's this way,
Yeah.
bounces onto the mirror, goes up to a card, and just make it a really big card. And you can put any beautiful color or shape, and that becomes your background.
That makes
And
sense.
instead of putting the camera down here, you just put it up there. You added the mirror pond, and you add another simple way, and you can put a train car on that coming forever as well.
Oh wow,
So
nice. Have you
yeah,
just random question as I'm thinking? Have you ever so once you slice off the strata cut, you can't use that slice anymore. Like I'm just wondering why wouldn't could you also take those slices and just, plop a slice in a predetermined spot and take that out and then plop the next slice in and then you don't have to do conveyor
no,
belts?
because right, it's a good question. No, it distorts when you cut the clay. It'll have a 5 to 10% distortion
Yeah,
because the friction of the front slice gets compresses it slightly as you cut it.
that makes
So
sense.
it's never going to be repairably. You can't put it back on. You can, if you really want to by hand sort of somehow even it back up all the way
That
up and
sounds
like put a
crazy.
little so you redistort it the right way.
Yeah.
But then the registration is always weird. Registering Stratacut after the fact is a really impossibly difficult thing,
So what do you
even
do
though
with
you
all
can.
that clay? It just goes in the garbage or you remix
Oh
it
no,
into new colors?
there's two or three purposes actually. Recently, I've put a lot of these on Plexi, and I'm trying to, you know, fund my ability to be a working artist of selling, objects of art that come from these Stratacuts.
Oh,
So
wow.
that, yeah, and I've saved a lot of slices, so I'm just trying to get them actually on. I probably only a third of everything I made. I can't say I've saved everything. Um, and yeah, this is a fairly, I wouldn't say this is as permanent as any other art form really at that point, because the beauty of a simple slice is that it makes clay itself, which is the genre of clay animation, into the genre of Stratacut, which means you can actually preserve it. With clay animation, you really can never preserve your objects because as sculpts that are prone to dust, dirt, and distortion, everything gets nicked and cut and looks crappy pretty fast, even if it looked good under the animation thumbs.
Yeah.
It's not a preservable. But Stratacut is because of its thinness. The thinness adds a viscosity, I believe, uses the viscosity of the existing oil, wax, pigment, and calcium carbonate, whatever the mixture that makes the clay. And it just sits there on the plex with what I call liquid surface tension, much like the way water doesn't roll right off of a countertop until it reaches a height and then it rolls off.
Yeah.
This is like really, really slow moving water, or like really molten rock. It moves very slowly, but it sticks. And so it doesn't have the weight to pull it down. And so it's a preservable medium in my mind. And that's just the first thing I do with a slice. The second thing is I incorporate it into paintings. So what I find great about Stratacut is that you can make it's easy enough if you can understand like a cone. A cone is a geometry shape, and if you cut off the top of the tip all the way down, it's a dot becoming a circle. And if you can understand that, then you can make sort of a Stratacut mouth and nose and eyes, and you just take the tube of what you're making as you do that. You just look right down at it and put the stuff in there. Like Mia Fiore, by the way, Mia Fiore is like sushi. It's like a tube or a cane of design that's in a substance like clay, and you slice it. But the goal of Mia Fiore is for the pattern to look the same every time. It's just a literal extrusion in Z depth, right? And the difference is Stratacut is an intentional warping, distortion, and animation in Z depth. Um, so I take these growing and shrinking faces. Anybody can make a face in Stratacut that's fun and a monster, and take some texture, look at some texture videos I have, and build one, but only try to make the bottom of it look good. And then just simply extrude it up so it's really small at the top, right? So it all just pinches toward the top.
Yeah.
When you cut that away, it's just like explosive and it's toward a satisfying design. This is like one of the simplest Stratacut designs where people can successfully feel like, oh, I made that thing, right? If you do that, you can repurpose all of those slices as dots, as small things getting bigger and bigger, and you can actually see the morphology of
Huh.
the entire piece if you just lay it onto glass or
Yeah.
onto Plex.
That
And
makes a
it's
lot of sense.
kind of hypnotic and beautiful in its own thing. It's sort of a piece of it's it's oddly modern art, not modern art. It's really an expressive post-industrial art, really.
Totally.
It's a combination of sort of tribal primitiveness and technological duplication, because you're duplicating a lot of these things, right? There's an enormous amount of duplication. So I use those in these paintings. And then the last purpose, well, there's two other purposes. You can take any set of slices and slightly offset them a little bit at an angle. And when you put clay on an angle, that's the magic place. And you decide what angle to the camera you want that clay to be. And you can take one animation, put the slices back together at this new angle, cut it again, and you'll get a whole new animation that's actually really amazing looking.
Huh.
It's like watching the world through a blender, but all of the slices, all of the slivers make sense, like a really low res, um, low poly version of. I don't know. Anyway, repurposing it as textures is excellent like that, and yeah, the last point is just to add it to future designs. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Once the texture gets dense and worked, it can be quite beautiful. And once it's cut up, great, it's still beautiful. And I put that as pieces in other future designs because that level of texturing takes work to do. And the fact you cut it up actually gives you an automatic new level of texture fun.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm
There
trying to
it
think
is.
of what other animation
Four
technique you can
different
literally
things.
take the same animation and run it again, and it's something completely different and interesting. Also, I'd love to go to a gallery someday and you walk in and it's just wall to wall, ceiling to floor, just strata cuts of like for instance that 40-foot one, and you just kind of
Yeah.
trail your eyes and look at the whole thing all at once instead of as a
Oh,
sequence. That would be super
I
cool.
would have to build that again, right? Or build more. I mean, if you're talking
Yeah.
about non cut up, I that's a 10 years of work to try to fill a gallery
Yeah,
with.
right. Have
But
you ever used any other materials other than just clay?
yeah, of course, Fimo, Sculpey, they
But I
are
mean, like
hardening.
for instance, like I don't know if you consider the strata cut, but like I don't know if you've seen Kevin Perry's where he like cut up chocolates and fruits and like time lapse them. Would you
Yeah,
consider that kind of strata cut too?
yeah, it is actually, but it's any way you cut up nature is fascinating. You know, you cut up a log, you cut up you think of a bulldozer plowing through the earth and
Yeah.
doing it in a repetition at a very large scale. You would get an amazing strata cut from the striations in the Earth's rock. Um, I think that the MRIs, the MRIs that cut
Yeah.
through fruit are brilliant, right? Because you see the stuff inside. The, really, all I'm when I talk about what I do, it's really about a language of thinking, a way of perceiving, so you can create that. You're not
Yeah.
taking what nature gave you, you're designing it and making it go somewhere as a character or as a piece of art that has a musical flow to it, or um, it's the human ability to conceive of something like that and create it that isn't actually from the vegetables or the beautiful bananas or the things. But
Yeah.
there's the secrets. You look at that stuff, and those are all the secrets of Straticut. You just have to design knowing, hey, this is how it looks, dude. So a lot of this is on everybody who. This is mostly mental. You don't need a lot of clay to figure this out. You just have to keep asking this question 100 times. It's like, oh, how did that happen in shape in time flow? If I were to shape the banana that somebody cut up, and I'm not sure if that was Kevin Perry, but I've seen a lot of these. And uh, why would I have designed that shape if I were doing it in clay in a sort of 4 dimensional time flow represented in 3 dimensional space, if you will? But again, it's time flow, and it's much like the Kurt Vonnegut character that we can't think of right now. It's the aliens at sea in 4D. Um, you're building that part of the muscle, right, in your mind, and I don't think that's a muscle a lot of people use. So I think it's a the art form is a gateway to thinking that way and understanding that way and learning that everything is contiguous and you have control over that continuity. You have control over, and it's like really fascinating aspects too, because you can have an animated blade. A lot of people don't consider that a flat blade is really limiting. Um, with real Stratacut clay, I could probably do a bowed blade, and super, if I had a lot of technology, I could probably do corrugated blades, right? It would require a really sophisticated alloy and machine shop to do stuff like that. But you could animate to a corrugated blade, right?
Yeah.
And this is why CG Stratacut is such an incredible thought, although inevitable. It's inevitable that extrusions of human behavior and motion, which we're all fascinated by and we all look at all the time, but we can make those like the Kurt Vonnegut characters are seeing and then cut them away. But we use Booleans, and we can make the cutter an animated piece itself. It can be a circle, a ball, it can be changing in any shape you want.
Right.
And then that gives you so much power that it's really up to you to decide how you want to, if you were to make that creatively, like in CG or as a rephotographing a real block and putting that into CG and adding the motion flow back into it, however you wanted to approach it. Um, I think that would be my point is I just want to say that the angle at which you design the time flow of your sculpting, of your geometry, that angle can be any angle, depending on how you want the knife to hit it. Everything you program is completely different looking if the knife is coming at it from a different angle, and sometimes really beautiful coming at it from a different angle. Um, it's the nexus of those two things that is the design of the block. And I think
Yeah.
that part of it's left behind. Everybody thinks it has to be a fucking knife. No,
I love the
it can be.
philosophy behind what you're doing. You could have just been like, "Oh yeah, I cut clay," but no. I love this. I actually just looked it up. It's the alien race from Kurt Vonnegut is that I never knew how to pronounce this. Tralfamadors from Slaughterhouse
Yeah,
Five. That's where he talks
yeah.
about it.
Tralfalmadors. Yes.
Tralfamador. I
We're
don't
gonna.
know.
You're gonna get. Somebody's gonna correct you in the notes today. I'm
Yeah, I
sure.
hope so. So okay, so bring
And
me
I don't know
back.
which book that was from, or if he. Yeah,
It was from Slaughterhouse Five. They live on some alien planet where they see in the fourth dimension.
Slaughterhouse
So
Five. Yeah.
bring me back. You discover Stratacut
How
and
did
you
I
kind
get
of
here?
you name it, you make it a
Yeah.
thing. How did
Yeah.
you originally come up with this idea to pursue
I
this?
have
And
been. I started sculpting at age 5,
Mhm.
which is unusual because I never really stopped sculpting. And my sister Shelley and my other sister Carrie had a table, the dining room table, set aside for clay, and all we did was sculpt, an hour a day or 3 hours a day or at night or whenever. And it's a lot like a quilting bee. It gave us the chance to develop whatever fantasy shapes we wanted to make in mirroring real life. It's like a lot of it is you're putting what's happening today into your clay, right? So at the age of 8, my sister Shelley, who is also a great artist, you can look her up, is sculpting a birthday cake because I had a birthday and she made this out of clay. She cut it open, and then I realized, oh my God, it didn't disappear. It's pristine. It looks good. It's like magic. And the epiphany was very strong, but I knew that I didn't know what to do with it. I knew, oh shit, I'm 8 years old. I have no idea what to do with that. Uh, and I just filed it away and never forgot it. It would just be one of these dreams that came back to me every few years or every 6 months and I learned all of the other skills of filmmaking and animation and other traditional arts to put it into motion. So it was really when I was 22, is that right? Something like that. And I sat down and said, this can be it's not really a science, but this can be a language. This can be an understood shape equals time over flow. And I sat there and you just cut it up, make notes, remember it, cut it up a different way, make notes, remember it. And then you start to understand the language by reverse engineering it, by just saying, oh, now if I twist it like this, what do I get? Just don't forget those things. It's just self-education of, that. But cutting it up is such a refreshing, amazing joy that it's got its own satisfaction after a while. So I thought, oh, what do I want to do with this? This is my first year of Cal Arts as a master's student. What do I want to do with it? And um, the fluidity of what it was telling me when I looked at how it moved was, I call it hypnotic and seductive. Um, it's also the morphic part of psychomorphic is the fact that all of the plasma mud, the neon plasma mud, is moving in whatever direction you've designed it to be. It's not psychedelic in the sense of uh, gosh, I don't want to get back into the Greek. That's really arcane. But delic is logic, I think, and psychologic is what psychedelia is. But I think of it as a bunch of Nouveau paintings from the 20s in Munka and a bunch of 60s posters, right?
Yeah.
Which are great, by the way, from the 60s. That's psychedelia. And so psychedelia has that birthplace. And I think what I'm building is more tribal and strange. And so the morphic part of it is an important piece. Uh,
You're at
what do you
Cal
do with that
Arts
language?
and you're
Yeah, I'm at Cal Arts,
you
right?
have
The
this.
medium is the message. And I thought, oh, this is a funhouse mirror on reality. I can actually make uh, I can seduce and abuse. Like I want to make a film that's so difficult to watch, but you can't stop watching it. That was the
Yeah.
objective of Bug Box, right? How much how much can I hypnotize you and then also abuse you visually, and then hypnotize you again and abuse you and hypnotize you? That was the push and pull, and not go over the line of incoherence, not go over the line of chaos, not go over the line where your mind says, "Oh, I've had enough, I'm walking out." But you want to think about it. You know, the goal is I want to think. I'm actually considering whether I want to watch the rest of this film, and the story is disinformation over, media overload, disinfotainment, really, I think is a better way to describe it, where you're using entertainment both as consumer, the practice of consumer behavior is so integrated with branding and the way images have a powerful impact on people, and all the way audio and images work, and then the way we socially associate with influencers and celebrities and all of these other entities that float around in the circus of bullshit that we call, social media now. At the time, to me, disinfotainment was enough to be you have hamburgers on one side and nuclear bombs on the other. You have seduction on one side, and you have sex on one side and death on the other. And there's a reason why they throw all of these things in a blender between banal, everyday things that make you want to buy stuff, and propaganda disguised as entertainment that's telling you, oh, and this is the way the world looks. This is the way the world should be. We're going to keep pounding it at you until you're defenseless to absorb that unconsciously. And so that was the objective of BuzzBox in this medium, because it was so weird. It wasn't just a bunch of photographs. So it went past the filter of the audience. They didn't have to sit there and go, oh, I know what he's doing. I know what that is. I know all these things, right? When I look at these images, a bombardment of them is really easy to filter out, because if it's really photographic, it's kind of like, yes, the brain is already processed it. And the funhouse mirror of BuzzBox is actually there to bypass it, because it's so warped and weird. It's seducing you to keep looking at it while it's trying to do all of these stop motion effects, which were lots of cuts, lots of strobing, lots of other sorts of dramatic, things are melting and things are, lights are going off everywhere. And then it pulls you back in with just the Stratacut seduction part of it. And then it tries to, offend you again, but not too much.
Interesting. So, okay. So you make this as
sorry,
your...
I didn't, that's CalArts. And go ahead. Yeah. Re-ask the question.
So, well, I'm just, I'm curious, you make your film, BuzzBox at CalArts. How do you go from that to, getting picked up by Sesame Street or whatnot? Like, how did you actually turn this into a paid, like, how did you convince people to pay you to make stuff after making this crazy film?
Right. It had a very strong audience of my own age, and also a strong dislike by
so you published it and immediately you got reactions.
I see. Yes. I would show it to get I showed it to get a job at Pee-wee's Playhouse, and I wanted to be an animator, and they were all filled up, but the director of photography, Daryl Studebaker, saw BuzzBox, and he said, God, you can run a camera. He wasn't looking at the animation. It's not about the politics.
It's like, oh, you can press record. Great
technique. It's just like, if you actually watch the camera work alone, and that's how I got my first gig. So there, I learned motion control. I did a lot of animation. I did the opening of Pee-wee, like the beaver, designed the beaver and the monkey and these other things. If you ever watch it, these are nostalgic things. And from that, I was brought onto Peter Gabriel's Big Time, which is 1986 in December. And then from that, really the whole MTV thing, really having such a strange medium worked in it for a very special 6 to 10 years in time.
So like, for instance, at Pee-wee's Playhouse, you're not animating Stratacuts, you're animating the characters, and then you're still pushing for Stratacut. You're still showing people, like, look at this thing I can do. Like, how did MTV, for instance, know you could do Stratacut when your professional work was something else?
BuzzBox got passed around.
Gotcha.
Just the very fact I was there, it got passed around, and so they knew, oh my God, we can uncork a can of whoop ass if we bring this guy into a music video, and that's what Big Time, I think, succeeded at. But it took yes, on Pee Wee's the first year in New York, I did like 3 penny episodes because the Aardmans had left. They did the first 9. They established the style, and because I knew how to animate on glass so well, I knew how to do multi-level glass animation. They said, "Hey, don't do the camera work. Come over here and work on Penny." And then they also had no animator for the opening. It's like everybody's working as fast as they can. No animators are available, and so they grabbed the only guy left, and that's the only reason I worked on the opening. And in an odd way, that's fun because they don't have time to correct your beaver design, and they don't have time to correct your monkeys or correct your bunny rabbits. These are all things I just made at the moment because the gun is so fast. And so if you find that little opening, that's all this is, a little opening, and you just work your way into that. It was the second season of Pee Wee where I did the Stratocut. So a lot of people mix those two. I came back to LA from New York and shot Christopher Columbus and 4th of July, which is, Stratocut heavy. It's completely that. For fans of that work, if you ever look at it, I did the animation as well. I mean, I was still doing the stop motion side of it, which is all of the character animation. If you look at those pieces, I only showed the Stratocut part, but there's twice as much animation there, which I also was doing with this just straight up clay character animation. And it's reasonable. It's pretty good. I throw some textures in, so it still looks Stratocutified. The design work in these sets that I built were still designed with that in mind.
So if you could have your way, you'd just be doing Stratocuts then for everything?
Wow. I learned a lot by not doing it. I mean, this went pretty well until I got picked up to do some crazy commercials. There's a Honda commercial now on Instagram that just went been viral a couple months ago, but because it's a boring ass commercial. It's very postmodern that way. It's a boring ass commercial. In the middle of it, this boring person just freaks out and starts screaming at the camera, and it's a Stratocut face. It's a 3-dimensional David Daniels Stratocut, like hot potato of crazy coming out, and then it comes back in, and it ends on this very normal shot. And those are the kinds of ways I was able to make a commercial using the technique and what I was known for, and that worked really fine. I also did 1992, I did the Freaked title sequence, which by the way is film. So that's a 24 frames a second thing. Much of the videos I did were either 30 frames, sometimes 24. Buzzbox, oddly enough, side note, is at 36 frames. It's at a very unusual frame rate, but there's a whole other story to that one. Generally, I try to work at film speed. They give you different effects. They give you your mind, the subconscious mind is attacked at different levels depending on the film speed, especially with Stratocut, because you run any Stratocut, I dare you, at 36 frames, then at 24, and then at 12. And I'd swear you're going to have an entirely different experience at those different frame rates as to what you're looking at. And by that, I mean what shapes you pull out from the same sequence.
Yeah, that makes sense because there's so much going on. It's hard to even, like, you don't even have time to look at everything. So that makes sense.
It's a Rorschach of your own mind. It's Rorschaching your own mind. By that I mean your own multiple. It's multiple pieces in your mind that are. That's what's fun about it, right? It's going into the reptile brain, through the eyes, through all these cortexes, and that messaging can happen at different levels that you really can't control a lot just by film speed, because there's no recognizable thing to hang on to. Meaning, at live action, you still think the same way at 12 frames, 24, and 36, even though hey, one's a little Keystone copy and the other's a little liquid or slow.
Yeah.
But with something that is not understood normally, remember, all the pixels are moving all at once. That's another key aspect of this. All the pixels are moving everywhere all at once.
Yeah.
And the retina can really only perceive that tiny little dot in front of us in focus, and everything else is sort of out of focus and happening. And so wherever you choose to look, you're still going to get this enormous, I don't know, mystery undulation in your eye that's sort of saying you're in some other place. You know, this is
Totally.
not the way you're trained to look. And
I never really
these
thought
are
about
aspects
like
I love.
literally every pixel is moving. There's no
Every
background. There's no fixed assets. Okay, so you know, Stratacut as a medium, it's not super popular. It is a, kind of a niche of stop motion. Why do you think
right,
it hasn't picked up when it is, you know, it's super available to anybody. You know, you could just
right.
go and buy clay for cheap. You don't need a lot of resources. Anybody
It can
can.
add up. It can if you get ambitious, it can add up.
If
But
you get a
yes,
40-foot long
yeah.
clay, that adds up. But you know, why do you think it hasn't like you don't see it in like I guess modern stop motion TV shows, films, commercials, except for like the like you said, the
Yeah.
Honda commercial, like here and there. Why do you think it hasn't picked up as
I,
much?
I think there's lots to say there. So let me not say just one thing about it. But first, I don't. I stopped promoting it or making it in 2000, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
nobody, you don't really see anybody else kind of heading it up as a medium, do you?
no, and that's actually changed a great deal, by the way. I was unaware of who. There were certainly there's lots of people who knew about it through those, you know, from 80 85 till 2000. Um, I went on to become a partner in a film production, animation, and special effects company, Bent Image Lab,
Yeah,
in Portland, and that took an enormous amount of my time. You have to dedicate yourself to other talent. You have to work with in a conventional a lot of different mediums that are not your native Stratacut because it's hard to teach anybody, and you can't
gotcha.
do it on a production line level. It's just not part of its beauty is that it's a wild horse, right? It is not a thing that you can really ship off or what you can get. What I would get is what I call a sous chef. A sous chef is someone who's making the clay textures who can understand, like a chef, how to put all the slicing and dicing together. That gives me the easy access to all of this intense kinetic material. Um, so agencies could not understand what they were going to get. Right
Right.
after a while, conservative blanket along with computer generated images came in the 90s, where you agencies really knew, oh, I should be able to pre-visualize this. I should be able to see this before I see it, right? I have a computer wireframe now.
Can you imagine
Redo
making a
that.
pre-viz Stratacut just to make the professional one later?
Oh my God. No, then they wouldn't understand it. They wouldn't understand whatever leap I was, if I'm giving them a thumbnail, they wouldn't even get it.
Yeah, I never thought of that. It's like, yeah, it's not very controllable. Like, it
Right.
sounds like a combination of things. One is, you know, you stop marketing it as the Stratacut
Yeah.
guy.
Right. Stop
Two,
marketing. Totally.
people don't really know how to do it. Three, it's a really hard sell to.
No, yes, that's right. Don't know how to do it. And three, the people with money for whatever eyeballs they're trying to buy, whatever image
Yeah,
seduction they're trying to design, right? They're going to design it in a group, in a consensus group, by everybody agreeing every week. Okay, this is the status of it. This is the
yeah.
thumbnail or
You can't
this is
have
the
an
drawings of
animatic
it.
or storyboard,
Yeah,
or
right.
you can't edit
All
it
that traditional
beforehand.
stuff. It's super important for anything more than two people to actually all agree on something, and therefore it automatically becomes you're only going to use it when you accept chaos, when you want something outrageous, when you understand that its its impact alone in at the hands of, I can make any, I don't want to say I can make most things that if I'm told what in my mind I can make most things at some level. It's recognizable. I can make it coherent and recognizable, but not in the speed, timing, and exact way that an agency would want to see.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're getting. Can't, what do you mean? I can't change it, right? And therefore it puts a damper on it.
When you're doing a
I guess I would.
Stratacut, do you actually come out with an animatic? Because you can time out things
Yeah.
somewhat.
There's a piece online, I think, regarding the Gary and Mike acid trip. I think it's Anatomy of a Stratacut or some. I'm probably mistitling it, but it's a very good little 3-4 minute video that shows how the acid trip part was built, and it's showing you sequences of um, where I had drawn out what action was going to happen and where I'm drawing the next one. So it was all keyframed on a timing sheet. So it's a long piece of paper. Every eighth of an inch is a frame, or in this case, a sixth of an inch, right? Because this is a
Yeah.
really huge piece. This is like 9 by 12 inches roughly. But and so every sixth of a frame, and then all of the keyframes are timed out. So I'm watching on the thing where I want the hand to go. So I want the hand to be here. I want the hand to be there. I want the hand to be there. Um, and that video is very good. So I just suggest that, because if it's hard, rather than me talk on and on about that, that's a really good one. And
Go
I
watch
think
the
there's two of
video.
them. You watched it?
I might have. I'd have to go in and see if I'd have to watch it and be like, oh right, I have watched this or not. I'm not
Yeah. Well,
sure.
if you find it, link it in
Yeah,
the.
yeah. I'll make a note for myself.
Uh, but I do when I pre-visualize. Yes, I think that it ranges from very heavy, very clear pre-visualization to very loose. Um, but the loose is always studied. I think of it more like a jazz musician, is that you have a lot of modalities and things at your fingertips. And so what emotion are you trying to put across, or what's the frame of the music you're making now?
yeah.
And I go in with a lot of licks. So it's like, okay, I'm going to work on a spinning globe today, or this week, or this month. And I think I'm going to do that in front of an audience. It's going to take 3 hours. How do I do it? Well, I build 5 of the 6 continents. Beforehand, I build all these textures that are clouds and water, and I design those textures, and then I go in front of an audience and actually show the five continents, and then I add Australia. I do the sixth because then they can see it happen,
Yeah.
and then I find that a really great way for people to grasp it, so they wouldn't be afraid. I believe a lot of it. What I'm going to sum up is a lot of education happened, I think, in 2012, 2013, 2014. I went to Anima Mundi in Brazil, and they were very welcoming. I got audiences of 200 or 250 people, and I was featured speaker, and I was trying to explain, give master classes in this in Rio and later Sao Paulo, and even went back to Belo Horizonte. And there's also a festival in Chilimonas. So during those 2 years, I did a lot of stereo videos. I did a lot of like how-to videos. I was trying to educate, and the best way was to take a stereo camera, shitty, but still two slightly different images. And that way you can see in depth someday, maybe YouTube with red and green glasses you can see today, but that sort of stereo will be upresable to some AI understanding of depth someday. And that really worked to create all of these people who have self-educated how to do Stratacut.
Huh.
And now I'm seeing, as opposed to what you think, which is very few people do it, I'm seeing an enormous amount of people do it. And I cannot believe it. My jaw drops when I see the new stuff that comes out of so many people who grasp, they grasp one level of it or another, and they're at different points. But some of them are very, very good, and some of them take it farther than I would have in a certain way. And I'm super thrilled that I can't believe I've discovered. I don't know, at least 2 dozen uh, people who do it well enough to look at, to say, hey, that's worth watching, and probably hundreds of people who are, working their way up on their first or second
Oh my gosh,
and
amazing.
having
That's
fun
really
with it.
cool. So
It
okay,
is really
so
cool.
let me ask you this. You kind of perfected the medium. You've sold it to big companies. You taught a lot about it, and
Yeah.
now you're trying to like turn some of it into art pieces. What's next for you with Strata Cuts itself? Like
Wow.
you mentioned, you're
So
you're funding yourself as an artist. Is
yeah,
that to
yeah.
make a big Strata Cut thing?
Uh, I would like to, and it's like my ambition is still boundless in that regard, but you have to think, cut twice. I mean, I think Measure twice, cut once. I'm doing a lot of
Is
thinking
this a
rather than
Stratacut pun?
yes, a Stratacut fun. Measure 10 times and then cut once. Uh, because you can't do it all. So when I like to engage with other people who are somewhere getting better at it now, because I think that there's a lot of things I never did that I can tell them, oh, try that. A lot of things. Um, I just couldn't do it all, but they grasp it enough to do a lot of really interesting things that I think are only going to grow in how weird and wonderful they become. So me sharing whatever, like it's like notebook paper where I thought of it, didn't have time, but then I can see, oh, that person could actually do that. And here I'm going to try to prod them or seduce them into actually trying that idea because I want to see it. So what was I saying? Just the community is immense. I mean, it's still small, but it's actually quite dedicated in a core that I would never have known, and the awareness of it is really, really quite large. And again, small. I'm really on the edge of that, but significant. They're not. They're like organic growth. They're not there for that moment and gone. It's really fun.
Ah, awesome. I love that. I love that. It's a growing thing, and you're really excited about it. I'm wondering if
Yeah.
somebody's listening and they want to learn, try it for themselves, see
Right.
like you have been doing some workshops lately. Are you still doing those, or is it more like publishing those online for other people to see? Or
Right. I want to do more, but not immediately. That was super exhausting. The summer I just went through has been an enormous amount of work, good work. A lot of it isn't even posted or shown yet. So I look forward to revealing a lot of work that I was up to in an educational sense, meaning I'm showing how it functions. The demos, which are sort of 3 or 4 hours long, I was able to do many of those last month. I want to do them again. I think I need a better, I don't know. A lot of it is just exhausting. And so it'll come down to, I will do more of them, but money and time seems like the two things I want to try next currently is I've been thinking for several years about NFTs like many people and what the problems are and what could be done better about them. Um, and I'm not saying that I will, but you change your mind every day to the next thing. I think I understand how I could make it really unique value, something that isn't just a JPEG, something that is, it could be both physical, digital, where you own, like I could imagine doing two, two different versions of monkeys or chimps. One is sort of evil evil chimps, and the other one is bonobos. Happy, blissful bonobos, and making 10 images in that loaf, in that block, and taking certain slices and giving everybody who buys, 10% of this it's not a JPEG, but this motion picture,
yeah,
if you want to call
yeah,
it impact, an actual physical items that came from the actual cutting up of the block, and an opportunity to own their particular character out of that. So if there's
right.
10 characters that they're all morphing from one character to the next to the next. If there's 10 characters in there, uh, I would say, all right, you get as your NFT that frame, but you get 5 other angles of it. You get 6 other angles of it. That's what you own, is actually a future-proof way of having the sculptural ability to see your Stratacut from all viewpoints. That's what
Interesting.
you're buying, not just a JPEG and not just a movie. Um, and also the physical items. If you want, you can have 9 slices from it or some cycle. I can figure that out. A lot of NFT people don't want anything physical. Some of them do, but many of them are pure, digital asset, and they've crypto bros that have, made their money there. And I don't know. I think that as a design thing, it'll be attractive because, I'll figure that out. But what I've just described to you is what I call a grid camera. A grid camera is not a, what is it? It's not a light field camera. an older version of this would be called light field, which is a bunch, 24 cameras all aimed to try to give you all views, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
AI is completely disruptive at this moment, and we'll be able to take 4 views or 6 views or whatever much smaller amount of views, and synthesize an eventual viewing ability that the ego motion of your head, the viewpoint of your head, where you're actually looking and what is actually playing to you at that instant what the Stratocut is doing. It's playing
Hmm.
at any angle you wished it to see at. To me,
Oh
that's not
wow.
very far off. That's actually quite soon coming.
I mean,
Good enough
some of the
to,
AI stuff I already see looks like like Stratacuts, basically.
well,
Everything's
nobody,
moving. You're warping an image over time. Like,
right, right. But I think that training AIs to really understand the data set of what it does is really good. I mean, it's not good or bad, it's going to happen. And I mean good in the sense that I would like to do it or have people who love Stratocut do it and work with
mhm.
them, because I think it's a genre, it's a whole look, it's a thing. It is not just my particular whatever. It's got an entire different way of behaving. It has an entire different way of behaving. Make that a data set that the AI can understand, and output. Yes, we're going to output thousands of hours of Stratocut are going to be output based off of that, and it will be more defined, more than I could ever define it. And I'm excited by that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that
but
sounds. I love that you're
but
thinking about like all the different possibilities with what you can do with this medium. Like, I think it's super interesting. I'm wondering, maybe as we're wrapping up a little bit, is there anything that you wanted to share that you kind of haven't said for people listening and super curious and interested about this, stop motion medium and maybe your career a little bit? Is there anything you wanted to share?
wow, um, thanks for offering. Uh,
Of course.
there's always so well. I mean, there's always so much to say. So
Yeah.
condensing it, and I tend to ramble. I apologize, but uh, well, I think if your channel is about people who want to break into the business, or into stop motion, or into animation in general, or into creative imagination
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
larger
Yeah.
context, right? Creative imagination. How can I become useful to society that they will pay me to be creatively imaginative, right?
Well,
What is my
it also takes guts to pursue that thing that you believe in versus just cookie cutter yourself into the industry. So
It does. You have to have a lot of self understanding. A lot of people want to be cookie cuttered. They want to go home and not have to think about it. They want their other life. They want the 9 to 5 to buy them the freedom to enjoy whatever the hell they want when they clock out. And that is not those who are willing to take the creative burden and say, all right, I'm going to do something that isn't cookie cutter, and I'm going to take the risk of failure, which is great and happens quite a lot, and yet find a way to learn from that failure and pursue the next thing and the next thing, realizing in the long run that'll be more satisfying. On the other hand, if you do get rejected, they're rejecting you because you're doing you, which is one of the most painful things, right?
yeah,
If you're doing you and you get rejected, it's like, damn, that hurts. But if you're like at a job and they say, well, you don't do that job well, it's, just a job. So I think the entanglement with your ambition, the entanglement with your ambition really drives you to do things that are above and beyond. And you must be ready for that if you really want to succeed or excel. I do think that going away from what the market is doing is a good strategy if you feel you have an insight that no one sees.
fair.
And you need to de-bias yourself about yourself, though. You need to know first, what am I? Am I into the cookie cutter, or do I really have something people need and want to see? And am I any good at it? And what would be the way I don't want to say monetize, but make it into a working behavior that I like doing? That's hard to do, because usually the things we love as we try to build them also become the things we hate because we do it too much, right? There's a point at which, oh my God, not again. Or much of my life, I worry, will become just bookkeeping and editing videos and figuring out how to, show up on time for a podcast. and
I've
and that would be sad.
Oh no. I think it's super interesting
No,
that you still feel this way after having, such a career in pursuing a very, very niche art
yeah,
form,
yeah,
which you have seen successes in. So I think that's super
totally.
interesting. And I really
No,
like
I,
what you,
I, I want you, everybody in your audience who sees this video, to see themselves as a unique talent, or
yeah,
somebody who doesn't really want to go into that arena and understand it. And if you do have that, be fearless about going away from what the market similarity is, and understand you're going to pay the price for that. It's going to be a lot of hard work. And if you don't want hard work, don't do it. But uh, the best thing is to know what it is you want to say, how you want to say it, where you want it seen, why you want it seen, why you want to get up every day and do it,
yeah,
and how that aligns with your talents and abilities for people to actually want to say, hey, here's, I like what your vision is. Here's compensation, or here's a way to make a living at it. Go for it, kid. That's the goal. And I think imagination is the greatest gift that any art form can express to any artist, right? The
yeah,
ability of another artist, in the biggest sense of the word, right? I don't mean it as a necessarily a fine artist, but anybody who makes art out of the moment of the process of their life. It's the broadest sense, right? I'm going to make art out of the process of every moment of my life. Um, there's no failing if that's what you're doing, right? You're not failing, and the chances of your success grow because you're enjoying it. Which maybe I'm talking to myself, because it's always a struggle, because I'm always trying to understand how do I make
I mean, you
myself
could be
enjoy
talking to
this.
yourself, but I'm also, relating to it.
Good.
It's getting my wheels turning about, when's the last time I
Yeah.
actually produced something of from my imagination art versus,
Yeah.
kind of the 9 to 5 job, which as is offers those freedoms that make
It does.
life
They're not.
easier.
They're not to be dismissed. They are super enjoyable.
Yeah.
Uh, you're at the end of it, though. The last thing I would say is you're training your ability to think. At the end of it, your life just becomes your decision making. You're training your ability to think. And that's what your art is actually helping you do, even if you don't know it, even if you're trying to succeed at it as an ambition goal for monetary and for recognition. What you're doing in that process is simply, hey, I'm making a good decision or a bad decision or a like decision or not, or people appreciate it or they don't. And your ability to think, and I mean this in all circumstances in all parts of the life, is really the most valuable thing you have, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
and
100%.
and I don't see people focused on that. I actually don't
Because it's
understand
it's
why that
easier
isn't
to
like
not to let somebody else think, and just
it
do
is.
do the
It
do
is.
the work. It's really hard to
There's a
think.
lot of lazy going on, and that's, if you're not lazy, that's your kryptonite. That's
Then
your
you're cursed.
secret strength. Uh,
You're cursed with thinking and being and working hard and taking risks.
yes, I don't know any other way to do it. It's the
Yeah.
only way.
Yeah.
But for people who don't know whether that's good or not, um, they're considering and thinking about it. It's really dig deep. Um, find something that takes you out of yourself. Find something that somehow realigns. I don't want to say destroys your ego, but realigns your ego so your ambition is actually driven by what you feel in your joyful heart that your life wants to be about.
Yeah. I
Um,
think that's
that's the goal. So go out and do that. And then you
yeah.
can come back and say, all right, this is the art I want to do. And this is how I'm going to make money at it, and all
Well, I
that
think these
stuff.
are important thoughts, and I think this is a great note to end on as well with the
Okay.
whole, imagination, and I think that's super important as artists, especially in the stop motion world where it's
Yeah.
not a cookie cutter job, and you kind of have to forge your way.
Right.
It's changing. It's changing now because there's so many productions going on, but naturally, I think stop motion artists specifically feel that a little bit more. So,
AI
yeah,
is going to hugely disrupt it, though. I mean,
yeah,
anybody at this moment, it's AI is going to disrupt it, but it's also going to be an enormous opportunity for stop motion, because uh, if you if you if what I describe as this grid camera, or this field array of 4 cameras or 6 cameras, can actually use artificial intelligence to make a spatial understanding that's played to your eyes. Once that loop is complete, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years from now, um, stop motion is on fire. right? Stop motion is it's got jet packs strapped to the sides and is taking off
Yeah.
because the ability to put texture on screen in stop motion is what its strength is, right? I'm getting super high definition texture out of this photograph, and therefore the puppet that's moving within it is um, uh, really fun to watch because I can feel he's physically vulnerable to his environment. He's not sort of abstracted like a 2D animation. He's physically living in there, and that's why the the fidelity I'm talking about, this is like a giant new upgrade in fidelity, and that's why stop motion will thrive again. Every time you have that in 4K, back before that in HD, in video standard def, and Super 8. Super 8 is where I started, and that's how a lot of stop motion, older folks in stop motion began. Every piece, every without that, I would never have gone on to do any of this, right? So the technology had to exist at a consumer level, and now the technology will be AI, which helps you put your field array together. So spatial stop motion. Who isn't going to want to watch that? But in and of itself, it's going to be 10 more years and they'll be able to simulate it anyway. So it's this, I just think you look at the ebb and flow of how the technology affects your love for this medium and try to understand that, and then you have a better career path.
Totally. I mean, there's a lot to think about in those statements. But we've chatted about your career, we've chatted about StrataCut, what it is, all the fun things you can do with it, and where it's going. So, David, thank you so much for coming on the chat. It's been a pleasure. I'm super happy we connected, and it's nice to finally talk to you after seeing your work basically since I was born, because you were doing stuff before I was born.
When did you first see something that I had done, by the way?
I think, probably when I was in like 12 or 13 years old, I think, when YouTube was just becoming a thing, and I was on all the stop motion forums and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad that it stood out to you and that you now understand it better. And
yeah, I don't know why I haven't tried it. Because like I started myself with clay, but I didn't have very much clay. I was making stuff, I had to pick apart all the colors of my characters to make a new character because I just didn't have any clay growing up.
Isn't that 100% of it? That's mostly why StrataCut.
Well, now as an adult, I could go to the dollar store and buy as much clay as I want. So we'll see.
Okay, I hope that's true. It's wonderful to see the amount of people interested in it. But if you don't do it, it's fine. It is. I don't know. There's some enjoy. It's very. Tell me after you do it how it worked, like how you felt about it.
Okay? When I try it, I will 100% get in touch with you. Okay. I think, and yeah, we'll chat again. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, thanks for your audience, and bye everybody.
And if you're listening and you want to, reach out or follow David's work, you can do so by checking out stratacut.com or checking him out on Instagram, which is strata_cut. I'll include both those links in the description of this podcast. So thank you so much for listening. And that's all for now. Okay, bye.
All right.
So I'm just going to